Hi, so my name is Olivia Perez, and I'm an MPhil student at HKUST studying environmental science, policy, and management. And today I will be talking about how to change your consumer behavior to becoming more sustainable. So basically, the question we want to answer today is how do we shift consumer behavior to become more sustainable? And to do this, we need to understand what's the difference of typical consumption from sustainable consumption. So typical consumption usually involves choices that maximize immediate benefits for yourself, while sustainable consumption involves choices that involve longer term benefits, not for yourself, but for other people and also for the natural environment. So there is a framework developed by White, Habib, and Hardesty, and this is called the Shift Framework of Sustainable Behavior Change. And they stand for social influence, habit formation, individual self, feelings and cognition, and tangibility. And these are the things that I will be discussing today. So first, let's go to social influence. So a lot of the things you do and a lot of your behaviors are basically dependent on the people that you know, people you look up to, and what you want people to think about the things that you're doing. So for example, social norms, these are basically what are other people doing or what are they commonly doing? And social learning involves learning from people that you like or influential to you, such as your parents, celebrities, people who are successful and powerful. So, what are the behaviors that these people approve of, and what are the behaviors that they disapprove of? And you will usually learn most effectively from the models that are attractive or influential to you. Another is social identity. So we are all part of certain groups that we identify with. This could be your family, this could be your friends, your gender, your race, your religion, your geography, or your politics. And you are more likely to do behaviors that people within your in group do versus people who are in your out group or social groups you don't identify with. And in contrast as well, people in your in group can change their behaviors based on what you are doing. So you can also influence other people to change their behaviors in that way. Lastly, social desirability. So this is basically what do you want to be seen doing and what do you want others to think about your behaviors and actions? Do you want people to see you as somebody who is eco-friendly, somebody who is sustainable? So if you want to be seen that way, of course, you will do behaviors that reinforce that concept. Next, let's go to habit formation. So what are habits? Habits are automatic actions. Basically, these require very low conscious mental effort and they are triggered by a lot of context cues. So in order to break the habit, you need to change the context. So what certain contexts are there where habits can be temporarily broken? These are, for example, graduating from school, starting or changing your job, starting a new family, moving to a new place, retirement, and in extreme cases, disasters such as natural disasters or man-made disasters. So why are these the times that your habits can change? Because these are the sudden changes in the ways people organize their lives. So a lot of the old habits that you have may not be applicable in this new context, in this new situation. You'll need to reorient yourself and the behaviors that and form new behaviors to adapt to this new situation, this new context. Another time that habits can be changed, what you can do is to set implementation intentions. So you think about what steps you need to take to engage in the new action. So instead of going from point A to point B, you can cut the action into smaller pieces, smaller realistic steps that you can do. For example, if you want to shift to a plant-based diet from a meat eating diet, you can't go from eating meat yesterday to fully going vegetarian or vegan the next day. What you want to do is to slowly develop that habit through time, because that will make it more repeatable, more easy for you to change to that behavior. So instead of not eating meat abruptly the next day, you can have incorporate one plant-based meal to your day and then slowly increase it every month or every week, depending on how you think you can do. And next, things that enable habits on a policy level could be, for example, penalties and incentives. Penalties punish unsustainable behavior. An example of that in Hong Kong is the plastic bag tax, where you have to pay 50 cents, if I'm not mistaken, to get a plastic bag when you go to the grocery, for example. So this has developed the habit for people in Hong Kong to bring their own reusable shopping bag whenever they do their groceries. And incentives, for example, reward sustainable behavior. And for example, if you go to Starbucks here and you bring your own reusable cup, I think you get a $4 discount. That's an example of an incentive. On a policy level, it's important to make things easy, basically making sustainable actions the default versus the alternative. So an example of this is when you go to a coffee shop, usually when you want to buy a latte, the default is dairy milk. But if you want to make people do sustainable behaviors, you by making it easy, you would make the default milk plant-based milk, and not and you would have to ask people to pay for dairy milk. So that's an example of making sustainable actions easier for people. Lastly, prompts. These are large, clear, easy to follow, and placed in a proximity to where the behavior will be performed. You would see this often in garbage or recycling areas where you can see big signs on where you're supposed to throw certain types of garbage and how you're supposed to recycle certain things. So these are put there to remind you what to do and how to do it properly. Okay, next let's go to the individual self. So there are 5 things under this, and the first is self-concept. So this is basically positively associating sustainable behaviors with your self-concept, because people display motivated biases, including the tendency to seek out and reinforce information that confirms pre-existing views. So if your pre-existing view is, I am a sustainable person, I'm a sustainable consumer, then I will continue to do things that reinforce the belief. There's also this study that says that possessions people own can become extensions of their identity. So consumers take better care of and are less likely to trash versus recycle identity-linked products. Next, let's go to self-consistency. So basically, people who engage in sustainable action in one domain are often more likely to perform sustainably in other domains as well. So for example, you are the type of person who recycles their trash, then you will also more likely be the person who will use reusable materials. And you will also be more likely the person who will join beach cleanups, coastal cleanups, because all of these maintain the self-consistency of you being an eco-friendly, sustainable person. Third, we talk about self-interest, and this involves highlighting the self-benefits associated with a given sustainable product, service, or behavior. For example, this Filipino brand Groove Activewear, they make exercise attire from recycled bottles, and whenever you buy an item of clothing from them, they show you how many bottles you recycled, and then you feel good about your purchase because you feel like you help save the environment from a lot of plastic pollution, right? And other examples would also include when you use public transport, you can think, okay, I'm cutting my personal carbon footprint by taking public transportation. And or for example, if you eat a plant-based meal, you can think, oh, this is healthy for me, and I avoid agricultural emissions by having more vegetables in my diet than meat, something like that. Next is self-efficacy. So this is basically your belief that you can do something, and people are more likely to choose sustainable options when there is high confidence that a particular behavior will make a difference. So if you think that I'm capable of doing X sustainable behavior, then you will probably do that just on the basis that you think you are capable of doing it. Lastly, let's go to individual difference. So individual differences in personal norms around sustainability predict sustainable behaviors. Personal norms are beliefs regarding a sense of personal obligation that are linked to one's self-standards. And a lot of studies show that those who are younger, more liberal, and highly educated are more likely to engage in pro-environmental behaviors. Let's go to the F, which stands for feelings and cognition. And we'll look into how negative emotions affect your behaviors. And first, we look at guilt. Guilt is able to change your behavior in a sense that when you assume individual responsibility for unsustainable outcomes of a certain behavior, it will lead you to feel more morally responsible for the environment, and you want to change your behavior to something that is more sustainable. Second is fear. So fear appeals highlight negative consequences of a given action or inaction. You often see this in narratives about the climate crisis, and fear appeals are effective because they scare people basically into action. But but a lot of studies show that fear appeals only work if it is accompanied by information on solutions. So if it's only fear, sometimes people develop this phenomenon called learned helplessness, where they are just so stunned by the fear that they're feeling, and they end up not doing anything. They feel very helpless. They feel very hopeless because they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do, and they're just scared. So it's important that you accompany with information on solutions and reinforce the self-efficacy in order for these fear appeals to be effective. Lastly, there is also sadness, and it's shown to lead to more pro-environmental behaviors, such as using energy footprint calculator or allocating donations to sustainable causes. There's this study that shows that if you make people watch a video on turtles dying in the sea, they are more likely to donate to marine conservation efforts because of how sad they felt while watching the video. Next, let's look at how positive emotions influence behavior change. So positive emotions such as joy and pride have been seen to influence consumer intentions to decrease plastic water bottle usage. So why do joy and pride influence the way we behave? Because when we feel happy doing something, we are more likely to engage in that behavior because we feel pleasure from engaging in that behavior. And also, when we feel proud of what we're doing, we are more likely to repeat that behavior as well. So optimism can motivate the maintenance of sustainable behaviors over time. And a lot of positive environmental actions can lead to feelings of hope, which can then increase environmental activism and sustainable behaviors. Lastly, let's go to information and knowledge. So basically, one person is unlikely to engage in more deliberate forms of sustainable behavior change if they are not informed about the problem, if they are not informed about the potential positive actions, and if they are not involved of the possible consequences. So you need to present information that conveys information regarding desired behaviors and the consequences. Example, why is eating less meat better for the environment? Then you want to answer the question as how does the meat industry contribute to emissions? And how do emissions contribute to climate change? And what is bad about climate change? So if you don't know anything about those four questions, it's very unlikely that you will shift to eating less meat because you don't really know why it's necessary. So it's important to provide people with this sort of information for them to make informed decisions to change their behaviors. Next is eco-labeling. You often see this in products that you buy and products that are developed in a sustainable manner. So this is helpful for consumers to know if their product was developed in a sustainable and fair way. But there is a tendency for a lot of companies to greenwash and make their own eco-labels that don't really go through official channels. So it's very important for you as a consumer as well to know which are the legitimate eco-labels and which are the illegitimate ones. And lastly, there's also framing. Basically, you want to frame your message to encourage sustainable choices. Lastly, let's talk about T, tangibility. A lot of eco-friendly actions and outcomes can seem very abstract, vague, and distant from the self. So a lot of consumers are not likely to act on issues that are improbable in nature or issues that they can't really imagine happening in their context, can't really imagine happening in their situation. And the problem with a lot of environmental changes that they emerge slowly over time, and the uncertainty that surrounds, and there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding problems and solutions related to environmental issues. So how do we address tangibility? We need to ground these environmental issues into something that's very relevant, relatable to the person. First, another example is matching temporal focus. Sustainability is very future focused, while consumption is often very present focused, what you need in the now. So what you want to do is to ask individuals, for example, to focus on future generations, and this can reduce a lot of present focused biases. Next is to communicate local and proximal impacts. So immediate consequences of pro-environmental behaviors for a given city, region, or neighborhood can make environmental actions and outcomes seem more tangible and relevant. If you say that these actions help people in another country, you might not really feel like, why should I do it? Why is this relevant? But if you say that this will impact your city, impact your neighborhood, then you will feel that it's more relevant to you and your experience and more tangible. And it's more likely for you to change your behavior to benefit your city or where you live. And in relation to that, we need to make our communications concrete. So you need to make sustainable issues more relevant and concrete for yourself. An example that you can do to enable sustainable behaviors is to communicate the negative impacts of environmental problems and subsequently outline clear steps to make a difference. And lastly, and perhaps the most difficult step to do in terms of creating tangibility is to encourage desire for intangibles, basically placing less emphasis on material things and more on experiences or services. So this involves like a sharing economy and also voluntary simplicity, living minimalistically as well. And this is very difficult considering the kind of system that we live in that is very materialistic or hyper-capitalistic. So we also have to keep that in mind. So some key messages that I want everybody to take away from this presentation is number one, changing context can break your habits. Number two, your mind is very powerful. If you believe that you can do it, it's more likely that you will do good behaviors and you will break your bad behaviors. Number three, it's very important that the habits that you do are habits you enjoy, or habits that make you happy, or habits that make you feel proud about yourself, because these are likely habits that you will repeat. In Hong Kong particularly, there are three things that are decisive towards whether people make sustainable purchasing decisions. The first one is perceived environmental effectiveness. Basically, does this action really help the environment? Number two, consumer effectiveness. This is the question of, can I do this? Am I able to do this action? Am I able to buy this sustainable product? Number three is social norms. What are the people doing? What is considered good? What is considered bad in the society that I live in? Okay. And then another thing that I want to impart to you is that changing habits to become more sustainable is a joint personal and policy effort. You can have all the will and motivation, but if there are no infrastructures or policies that enable sustainable behavior, it will be very difficult to develop that habit. So you don't have to be too hard on yourself when it seems it's very difficult to shift to some a more sustainable behavior, because the policies in place should make it easy for you to shift to that behavior. And lastly, you as an individual can make a difference. Know that small actions by many people can aggregate. So I hope everything that you've learned today can help you become a more sustainable consumer in the future. Thanks so much for your time and for listening, and I hope you have a good day.